There's a particular kind of person who learned very early that the world wasn't entirely safe. Not in a dramatic way, not with sirens or catastrophe, just in quiet, ordinary moments that left a mark so deep they forgot it was even there. Maybe it was the parent who was physically present but emotionally somewhere else entirely. Maybe it was the moment you reached for comfort and found distance instead. Maybe it was something you couldn't name then and still struggle to name now. But something happened, and somewhere inside that small, younger version of you, a decision was made. Not consciously, not deliberately, but made nonetheless. A decision that said, if I need less, I'll hurt less. If I expect nothing, I can never be disappointed. If I keep myself just far enough away, I'll never have to feel that particular kind of pain again. And so you built something. Quietly, brilliantly, without anyone teaching you how. You built walls so elegant they looked like independence. You built distance so practiced it felt like personality. You built an entire identity around the one thing that kept you safe when nothing else would. And for a long time it worked. Until it didn't. Because here's what nobody tells you about avoidant attachment, and this is the part that most people never stay long enough to understand. The very thing you developed to survive might be the exact thing the world desperately needs from you right now. Stay with that, because by the time this is over, you're going to see yourself in a way you never have before. Most people hear the word avoidant and immediately think broken, damaged. Someone who can't love properly, can't commit, can't show up the way other people seem to do so effortlessly. And if you've been in any kind of relationship, romantic or otherwise, you've probably heard some version of that story about yourself. You're too cold. You're too distant. You pull away when things get good. You shut down when things get hard. You're emotionally unavailable. You need to fix yourself. And maybe you've even believed that. Maybe you've spent years in quiet shame, wondering why it is that something so supposedly natural, so supposedly simple as just being close to another human being feels like the most complicated, most exhausting, most dangerous thing in the world to you. But what if the diagnosis is wrong? Not the attachment style. That part is real. That part we're going to look at honestly. But what if the story around it, the meaning everyone has assigned to it, including you? What if that story is not only inaccurate, but is actively keeping you from understanding the most important thing about who you are and why you're here? Let me take you somewhere first. Let me take you back, not to your own childhood, but to a concept that most psychology classes skip over, because it's easier to label than to understand. Attachment theory tells us that the way we connect or fail to connect to our earliest caregivers creates a kind of internal blueprint, a map, and that map becomes the lens through which we experience every relationship, every moment of closeness, every moment of conflict for the rest of our lives. Securely attached people got consistent warmth. They reached and were held. They cried and were soothed. And so they learned. The world is safe. People can be trusted. Closeness feels good. Anxiously attached people got inconsistency. Sometimes warmth, sometimes distance, sometimes love, sometimes something that felt very much like abandonment. And so they learned. I must fight to be loved. I must make myself impossible to leave. Closeness is everything, and I'm always about to lose it. And then there's you, the avoidant. You didn't get warmth that was inconsistent. You got warmth that was absent, or conditional, or came with so many strings attached that receiving it cost you something essential about yourself. You reached and were not held. Or worse, you were held in ways that didn't actually feel like safety. And so you did what any intelligent, sensitive, deeply perceptive child does when the environment they're in cannot meet their needs. You adapted. You stopped reaching. You turned inward. You found a way to need less, want less, expect less. And people called it maturity. They called it independence. They called it being easy. And nobody, not one single adult in your life, looked at that child and said, wait, something is wrong here. This child shouldn't have to be this contained. This child should be allowed to fall apart sometimes. This child deserves to be caught. Nobody said that. And so you carried it. You carried it into adolescence, where you probably watched other people form deep, emotionally messy friendships and relationships, and felt this strange mix of longing and thrill that you weren't doing that. Longing because some part of you, buried under all those walls, she remembered what it felt like to want to be close. Relief, because another part of you, the part in charge, the part that had been running the show since you were very small, knew that closeness meant risk, and risk meant pain, and pain was the one thing you had promised yourself you would never feel again, if you could help it. You carried it into adulthood, where you probably built a life that looks from the outside impressively self-sufficient. A career, maybe achievements, a reputation for being reliable, competent, capable, the person who doesn't need much, the person who never makes a scene, the person who handles things, and people respect you for it. But respect is a long way from intimacy, and somewhere, in the quiet moments, usually late at night, when the performance is over and you're alone with yourself, you feel it. That particular kind of loneliness that's different from regular loneliness. Because regular loneliness comes from being alone. Your kind of loneliness comes from being surrounded by people and still feeling like there's an oak between you and every single one of them. Now here's where I need you to stop and really listen. Because this is the part most conversations about avoidant attachment never get to. This is the part that gets skipped in favor of how to fix you, how to become more secure, how to let people in, how to do the work. And all of that matters. All of that is real and important, and we will get there. But there is something that has to come first. Something that nobody is saying loudly enough. The fact that you develop this attachment style means something about who you are at a fundamental level. It means you are someone who, as a child, was sensitive enough to register the emotional temperature of your environment with extraordinary precision. It means you were perceptive enough to understand, without anyone telling you, that something was off, something was unsafe, something required you to protect yourself. It means you were strong enough, even as a small child, to make an adaptive decision and execute it perfectly. You rewired yourself. You restructured your emotional needs to match the resources available to you. Do you understand how extraordinary that is? That's not brokenness. That is one of the most remarkable demonstrations of human psychological intelligence and resilience that exists. The problem is not that you did it. The problem is that you're still doing it. The map that saved you is now the map that's keeping you lost. The walls that protected you are now the walls that are imprisoning you. The strategy that worked in an environment where closeness was dangerous is now operating in a chire where closeness is not only available, but necessary. For you, for others, for the particular thing only you are here to do. And what is that thing? What is this mission I mentioned at the beginning? Because I didn't use those words lightly. I genuinely believe, and not in a motivational poster way, but in a deeply psychologically and spiritually serious way, that avoidant individuals, people who have walked through the particular fire of learning to survive without the emotional nourishment every human being deserves, carry within them a set of capacities that the world right now is in desperate need of. Think about what you've developed. Because of your history, you have an almost supernatural ability to observe. You watch rooms, you watch people. You notice what's not being said long before anyone else does. You read subtext like other people read headlines. You have spent your entire life becoming an expert in the gap between what people present and what they actually feel, because your survival once depended on accurately reading that gap in the people who were supposed to care for you. That is not a small thing. That is a profoundly powerful perceptual gift. Because of your history, you also have an extraordinary relationship with solitude. You know how to be alone in a way that most people find terrifying. You've spent years in your own company. You've learned, perhaps more deeply than almost anyone around you, how to sit with yourself, how to function without external validation, how to find your own ground without someone else holding you up. In a world that is increasingly addicted to noise, to distraction, to the desperate need for constant connection and approval, your comfort with aloneness is not a deficit. It is a discipline. It is a form of strength that is becoming increasingly rare and increasingly precious. Because of your history, you approach problems and people with a level of analytical clarity that others often cannot access because they are too emotionally enmeshed, too close, too afraid of what they might see if they look too clearly. You see things as they are, not just as you want them to be. And while this can make intimacy harder, it makes you extraordinarily valuable in situations that require clear-eyed assessment, honest feedback, and the courage to say what's true even when it's uncomfortable. And because of your history, when you do let someone in, when you do make the choice, the real conscious deliberate choice, to trust someone, to open a door that you keep so carefully guarded, the depth of that is unlike anything most people will ever experience. Avoidants are not incapable of love. They are capable of a love so considered, so intentional, so hard-won, that it carries a weight and a meaning that people who love easily and automatically will never fully understand. When you choose someone, it is not habit. It is not comfort. It is not fear of being alone. It is a genuine, clear-eyed, fully conscious decision. And that is extraordinarily rare. But here's the tension. Here's the thing that makes this so exquisitely complicated. These gifts, and they are genuine gifts, are currently wrapped in a survival mechanism that was built for a world that no longer exists. The observer in you is an extraordinary asset, but it sometimes becomes surveillance, constantly scanning for threats that aren't there, keeping you too far on the outside to participate in your own life. The comfort with solitude is a genuine strength, but it sometimes becomes a prison, a reason to stay separate when what you actually need, what your nervous system is actually crying out for beneath all that silence, is genuine human contact. The analytical clarity is a real capacity, but it sometimes becomes armor, a way to stay in your head and out of your heart, where the real territory of your life is actually lived. And the depth of your love is real, but it remains largely theoretical, largely private, largely uncommunicated. Because to let someone see how deeply you feel is to let them see how deeply you could be hurt, and that still feels like the most dangerous thing in the world. So the mission, let's talk about the mission. Because I think there's a reason that the particular path of the avoidant, with all its pain and all its gifts, leads somewhere very specific. And I think you felt it, even if you haven't had language for it. There's something in you that wants to be of use in a profound way. Not in a surface way, not in a look-at-me way, but in a real, substantive, leave something behind way. Avoidants often feel what I can only describe as a sense of purpose that's larger than the personal, like there is something they're supposed to do or understand or offer that has nothing to do with their own comfort or their own reward. Does that resonate? That quiet, persistent, sometimes maddening sense that there is something you are meant to do, and it is connected to the exact things that have caused you the most pain. This is not an accident. The capacity for deep observation you've developed makes you capable of understanding people at a level that can genuinely transform them, if you can learn to deploy it relationally rather than just analytically. The emotional self-sufficiency you're built makes you capable of holding space for other people's pain in a way that doesn't exist, which means you can be present for people in their worst moments without needing to also take care of you, which is one of the rarest and most precious things a human being can offer to another. The clarity you carry makes you capable of seeing truth in situations where others are too rapt, afraid, or too close to see it, which means you can be a voice of genuine honesty in a world that is drowning in comfortable lies. And the depth of your feeling, the feeling you've kept so carefully hidden, so carefully protected, if you can find a way to let that out, to let it be seen, to let it be expressed, it has the power to move people in ways they will carry with them for the rest of their lives. The mission of the avoidant is not to become someone else. It is not to perform security you don't feel, or force intimacy you got not ready for, or pretend that the walls aren't there. The mission is to understand, at a cellular level, that those walls were built by a child and can only be dismantled by an adult. That the child who made the decision to stop reaching was not wrong. They were brilliant. They were doing the only thing that made sense. And they deserve enormous compassion and enormous gratitude, because they carried you to here. But the adult standing in front of those walls right now is capable of something the child never was. The adult can choose, not from desperation, not from wounding, but from genuine, clear-eyed, fully informed choice. The adult can look at another person and say, I see you clearly. I am not idealizing you. I am not projecting onto you. I am not using you to fill a hole in myself. I see you, and I am choosing to move toward you anyway. That is not weakness. That is one of the most powerful acts a human being is capable of. The work, the actual psychological work of the avoidant, is not about becoming needier, or more dependent, or more emotionally demonstrative. It is about integration. It is about bringing the part of you that observes and the part of you that feels into the same room, into the same conversation, into the same body. It is about learning to tolerate the specific kind of vulnerability that comes with being known, really known, not just seen from a distance. It is about understanding that the feeling of being trapped that you get when someone gets too close is not a signal that you are in danger. It is a signal that you are approaching the edge of your comfort zone, which is not the same thing. And you, of all people, know the difference between actual danger and the memory of danger. You've spent enough time reading that distinction in other people. It's time to read it in yourself. This requires, and I want to be completely honest with you about this, it requires sitting with some discomfort that your entire nervous system has been trained to avoid. There will be moments in this process where you want to pull back, disappear, go cold, create distance. And every cell in your body will be telling you that this is the right thing to do, that this is self-preservation, that this is wisdom. And you will have to look at that impulse with the same clear-eyed honesty that you apply to everything else in your life and ask, is this actually danger or is this intimacy? Because the two have been wired together in your nervous system since before you had words. And learning to separate them is the work. And it is hard. And it is worth every single uncomfortable moment. Because what's on the other side is not dependency. It is not the thing you've been afraid of, losing yourself in someone else, being consumed, being left, being disappointed in the particular devastating way that only happens when you're grick. Hearts, to let someone close enough to really hurt you. What's on the other side is wholeness. Not the performed wholeness of self-sufficiency, but the actual wholeness that comes from being known and choosing to stay, from letting someone matter and discovering that you can survive that, from opening a door you're journey to the forncelum that kept locked for decades and finding out that the air on the other side doesn't kill you, that you're still standing, that you're actually for the first time fully present in your own life. There's something else I want to say about the social dimension of this, about what avoidants specifically are built to offer in the larger context of the world we're living. Right? We are in a crisis of authentic connection, not a shortage of communication. We have more ways to communicate with more people, more constantly than at any point in human history, but a crisis of depth, a crisis of real seeing, real hearing, real presence. Most interactions, even intimate ones, are happening at the surface. People performing versions of themselves for each other, scrolling past, swiping past, moving past. Nobody lingering long enough to really be changed by another person. And avoidance, precisely because they have never been comfortable with surface-level connection, precisely because they have always known the difference between real closeness and its imitation, are uniquely positioned to model and facilitate the kind of depth that the world is starving for. Not by being perfect, not by having it all figured out, but by being willing to do the honest, unglamorous work of going deep into themselves first, and then, slowly, carefully, bravely, reaching back toward other people from a place of genuine understanding rather than wound. The world doesn't need more people who love easily and attach automatically and stay connected, without ever really examining why. The world has plenty of that, and it's leathery signs that look intimate but feel hollow. What the world needs is people who understand that real connection is a choice, a conscious, deliberate, repeated choice, made in full awareness of the risk and the cost and the absolute non-guarantee of any of it. People who bring to their relationships the same rigor and honesty and clear-sightedness that avoidants bring to everything else. People who don't stay out of fear or habit or comfort, but who stay because they have looked clearly at what's in front of them and decided, with full information, that it is worth staying for. That is the avoidance potential. That is what's on the other side of this work. Not a life that looks like everyone else's. Not a sudden effortless openness. Not the erasure of your history or your wiring or the particular shape of the person that history has made you. But a life in which your gifts are no longer imprisoned by your wounds. In which your capacity to observe is matched by a willingness to participate. In which your comfort with solitude is a choice rather than a default, in which the love you are capable of, the real, considered, deep, deliberate love, actually reaches the people it's meant for. I want to talk for a moment about the people in your life who have loved you or tried to. The anxiously attached partners who held on too tight because they sensed, rightly, that you were already 1 foot out the door. The friends who eventually stopped calling because every time they reached out they felt like they were imposing. The family members who gave up trying to have real conversations with you because the shutters always came down at exactly the moment things started to matter. I am not saying this to produce guilt. Guilt is not useful here, and it is not what this is about. I am saying it because if you are going to fully understand your mission, you need to understand the impact of the mechanism, not so you can hate yourself for it, but so you can see it clearly enough to change it. The people who love avoidance are in a particular kind of pain. They are not stupid. They know something is there. They can feel it. The depth of you, the loyalty underneath the distance, the care that expresses itself in 1,000 indirect ways, because the direct ways still feel too exposed. They know there is more than what you're showing them. And the gap between what they sense is there and what they are allowed to access is a specific kind of torment. And you know this. You feel their longing, and it often makes you pull back further because it feels like pressure, like demand, like the threat of being consumed. But try, just for a moment, to see it from the other side. They're not trying to consume you. They are trying to reach you. And every time you disappear, a little of their hope goes with you. And eventually, if this goes on long enough, all of it does. The mission is in part to change this dynamic. Not for them, because relationships built on self-improvement for someone else's benefit are fragile and resentment-prone. But for you, for the version of you that is going to look back at this life and ask, did I show up? Did I let myself be here? Did I let the people who wanted to love me, love me? Did I let the love that was already inside me out into the world where it could actually do there? Or did I manage and maintain and control and protect until I was so safe that my entire life happened just out of reach of the only things that could have made it fully real? Because here is the truth, the hardest truth, the one that the avoidant armor is specifically designed to never let you feel for too long. The life you've built to be safe from pain is also a life that is safe from joy. It's not the mild, manageable satisfaction of things going well that you're very good at, but the full, unguarded, inconvenient, glorious, the terrifying joy of being completely present in your own life, the completely seen by people who love you, completely moved by things that matter. That kind of joy requires the same vulnerability that produces the worst pain. You cannot have one without risking the other. And you have been making the choice, perhaps without even knowing it was a choice, to foreclose on both. The mission that is available to you, the one that I genuinely believe only people who have walked this specific road can carry out, is the mission of conscious love. Not love that happens to you. Love that you choose. Not connection that you fall into. Connection that you build, deliberately, from the inside out, one honest conversation, one moment of genuine presence, one act of letting yourself be seen at a time. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is the quietest, most radical, most transformative thing a human being can do. And it is yours. It has always been yours. It has been waiting for you, behind all the walls, in the part of you that you've been protecting so carefully for so long. You were not broken by what happened to you. You were shaped by it. The shape is intricate and beautiful and hard-won, and it is not the final shape. You are not finished. The most important chapter of who you are is the one you are in right now, the one where you decide that with full awareness and full choice to let yourself be reached, to reach back, to stay in the room when the feelings get big, to say the true thing instead of the managed thing, to let someone matter enough that losing them would hurt, because that is the price of admission to a real life, and it is worth paying. The question I want to leave you with, the one I hope you'll sit with long after this is over, is this. If the walls came down, not all at once, not in some catastrophic collapse, but slowly, brick by brick, by choice, what is the first thing you would let yourself feel? And who is the first person you would let yourself move toward? Tell me in the comments, because I think the answer to that question, your specific, personal, honest answer, is the beginning of everything.